I'm Teisha Bader with Shalom TV's news update for Wednesday, April the 9th, 2014. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry seemed to suggest yesterday that Israel is to blame for the collapse of the peace process. While addressing the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee yesterday, Kerry explained that both sides had taken, quote, unhelpful steps recently, but suggested that the real crisis in talks began with Israel's decision to delay the release of the last round of 26 Palestinian security prisoners unless they felt a commitment from the Palestinian side to continue negotiations past the April 29th deadline.
No one should be fooled, and believe me, no one is fooled. Both sides, whether advertently or inadvertently, wound up in positions where things happened that were unhelpful. Unfortunately, the prisoners weren't released on the Saturday they were supposed to be released. And so day went by, day 2 went by, day 3 went by, and then in the afternoon, when they were about to maybe get there, 700 settlement units were announced in Jerusalem, and poof, that was sort of the moment.
After Kerry's remarks, State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki tried to make clear that Kerry was not blaming one particular side. She said, as has been the case throughout this impasse, today Secretary Kerry was again crystal clear that both sides have taken unhelpful steps, and at no point has he engaged in a blame game. Psaki said today he even singled out by name Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for having made courageous decisions throughout the process. Kerry did include in his remarks to the Senate committee that Israeli and Palestinian leaders had both made courageous and important decisions.
You know, for Prime Minister Netanyahu to release prisoners is a painful, difficult political step to take, enormously hard.
And regarding the Palestinians' refusal to recognize Israel as a Jewish state, Kerry told the committee that while the U.S. government and the president support the recognition and believe it should happen, how and when it happens has to be part of the negotiations, and that it's not going to happen in the beginning. And the New York Times reports that an official in the Netanyahu government reacted to Kerry's suggested blame on Israel, saying it was the Palestinians who violated their commitment to peace efforts by turning to the 15 international bodies, and that Kerry's comments will ultimately hurt negotiations and toughen Palestinian positions. The official said Secretary Kerry knows that it was the Palestinians who said no to continue direct talks with Israel in November, who said no to his proposed framework for final status talks, who said no to even discussing recognition of Israel as the nation-state of the Jewish people, who said no to a meeting with Kerry himself, and who said no to an extension of the talks. The official further said that it was understood both by the Palestinians and by the United States prior to the restart of peace talks that Israel did not commit to any limitation in building in the settlements. And so the Palestinian claim that Israel's announcement of construction in East Jerusalem being a violation was simply not true. Meanwhile, Israeli government officials said today that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was ceasing contact with the Palestinians on non-security related issues. Netanyahu reportedly ordered government ministers not to meet with their Palestinian counterparts in an apparent response to Palestinian violations, namely the Palestinian Authority's application for membership in the 15 international bodies last week. Officials said, though, that the ban did not apply to Chief Israeli Negotiator Justice Minister Tzipi Livni, as well as not to defense and security officials who could all continue their contact with the Palestinians. Israel police have arrested 2 suspects in yesterday's attack on an Israeli army post by extremist Jewish settlers. As we reported to you yesterday, the army post was ransacked by the settlers near the West Bank settlement of Yitzhar. They were protesting the demolition by the army of several illegal outposts there. Following the demolition, a group of settlers in the area threw stones at the Israeli border police forces, lightly injuring 6 of them. And about 50 or 60 settlers also raided the nearby army post, destroying army equipment, including tents, fuel tanks, water tanks, and generators. Israel police arrested a man in his 20s from the Gilad farm settlement, as well as a man in his 40s, for their suspected involvement in the incident. Police also arrested a 16-year-old teenager in Yitzhar after he reportedly threw rocks at a police car early this morning. The Times of Israel reports that Israeli officials held an emergency meeting this afternoon to address the rise in violence against the Israeli military, which is viewed with great severity. The meeting included Police Commissioner Yochanan Danino and other officials from the security forces, as well as from the Attorney General's office. And Israeli President Shimon Peres weighed in on the Yitzhar incident, speaking from Beijing, where he is on an official state visit to China. Peres condemned the attack on the Israeli border police forces and on the army post that is manned by IDF reservists, who Peres said were there to provide protection for the settlements. He said from the very creation of the state, the Israel Defense Forces have been the nation's most treasured asset, and an irresponsible group should not be permitted to harm them. The Jerusalem Post reports that a fleet of the first new Super Hercules C-130Js landed in Israel today. The planes, known in Israel as Shimshon or Samsons, as a nod to the powerful biblical figure, were inaugurated in the Israel Air Force today at the Netivot Air Base, after several years of design and engineering work by both Israeli and American engineers. The planes were manufactured and purchased from Lockheed Martin last summer. CEO of the American company, Marilyn Hewson, was at the ceremony in Israel today, where she said she was honored and proud to support the IDF in its mission to protect and defend the state of Israel. Hewson said, "We feel privileged to bring you the world's most advanced technology to meet the complex and dynamic security challenges of this region." She said, "We are proud of our decades-long partnership. Today we mark the latest milestone in that important partnership, and we celebrate the longtime friendship between Israel and the United States of America." Today's ceremony was also attended by Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon, IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Benny Gantz, and U.S. Ambassador to Israel Dan Shapiro. Argentina has announced plans to construct a Holocaust Memorial in Buenos Aires, making it reportedly the first public monument in Latin America to pay tribute to victims of the Holocaust. Argentine President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner met Monday night with a delegation of Argentine Jewish leaders, including Holocaust survivors, where she announced the construction of the monument in the capital, which will be built in Shoah Plaza, a public square that was inaugurated 2 years ago. The memorial's inauguration is approximated at 8 months away. It has actually been in the works for years, but has been continuously postponed. According to the World Jewish Congress, approximately 200,000 Jews live in Argentina, and Buenos Aires has the second largest Jewish community in the diaspora after New York City. President of the National Jewish Umbrella Organization, DAIA, Julio Schlosser, welcomed the decision to construct the memorial. He said this was a special day for the Jews of Argentina. And turning to our Shalom TV programming for tonight, Wednesday, April the 9th, coverage from the recent Jerusalem Post conference in Times Square in New York City, at the Marriott in Times Square in New York City, is coming up at 7 o'clock, followed at 9 o'clock by a special L'chaim focused on Passover with an introduction to the meaning of the upcoming holiday and the symbols of the Seder service. And then at 9:30, Rabbi Irving Yitz Greenberg talks to Mark Golub about the meaning of Passover as well as Shabbat. And then at 10 o'clock, acclaimed Jewish novelist Jonathan Safran Foer talks about why he created the new American Haggadah and talks about his feeling for Jewish life with Rabbi Michael Paley of the UJA Federation of New York. That's all coming up tonight here on Shalom TV and ShalomTV.com. And that's Shalom TV's news update for Wednesday, April the 9th, 2014. I'm Teisha Bader.